They say the sky is empty, but I know better. It remembers. Welcome to Flight 733, a red-eye from New Orleans to Denver, a flight I never should have taken. My name is Rhett Calhoun, a pilot haunted by his past, but I found myself navigating a nightmare governed by 3 strange rules just to stay alive. What's the scariest flight you've ever been on? Tell me in the comments below, and if you're brave enough to buckle up, subscribe to Night Creepypasta Rules and ring that bell, because on this flight, the destination isn't on any map. The journey begins now. They say every pilot has one flight they can't scrub from their memory, the one that etches itself onto your soul like frost on a winter window. For me, that was Skylink Flight 733, 8 years back, a mangled wreck of twisted metal and fractured recollections, leaving me the soul-haunted survivor. Now, inexplicably, operations had assigned me Flight 733, a red-eye from New Orleans to Denver, a route I had no memory of ever bidding for, with a passenger manifest that felt unnervingly sparse, and a set of 3 cryptic rules pressed into my palm by a man whose eyes held the chilling stillness of an Arctic void. Always wear a silver chain when flying through fog. When cabin doors open by themselves at 30,000 feet, someone needs to step out. When you realize you've flown this countless times, this is your final chance to live. The recycled air in this aging Boeing already felt wrong, thick with the faint, metallic scent of ozone and something older. A pervasive silence broken only by the low hum of systems that seemed to be remembering another, far more catastrophic journey. My first officer on that original flight, good old Henderson, he'd always scoffed at superstitions, at the old tales about silver. His empty seat beside me now was a constant, screaming void. The New Orleans twilight bled purple and orange across the tarmac as I went through the pre-flight checks for Flight 733. My new first officer, Tasha Reynolds, was a sharp, young aviator, all keen eyes and a restless energy that felt jarringly out of sync with the leaden weight in my own gut. "Just 43 souls tonight, Captain," she commented, tapping the manifest. Ghost flight, almost. The term snagged in my mind. Luis Ortega, our lead flight attendant, was a calming presence, his movements economical and reassuring. Yet even he seemed subdued, casting quick, unreadable glances around the cabin as if sensing an invisible guest. As I settled into the familiar worn leather of the captain's seat, a man in a crisp airline technician's uniform appeared at the cockpit door. Marcus Bellamy, Senior Ground Operations. I recognized him vaguely from around the hangars. Quiet, efficient, always seeming to be there when the more recalcitrant systems needed a firm hand. Just a final diagnostic on the tertiary avionics bus. "Captain Calhoun," Bellamy said, his voice smooth, almost deferential. His eyes, though, were a flat, depthless gray, and they didn't quite meet mine. He fiddled with a panel beneath the dashboard for a moment, his movements precise, almost ritualistic. Some atmospheric anomalies reported further north. Standard preventative. He withdrew, then paused, turning back. He pressed a small, cold metal box into my hand, a little something the old-timers swear by, for the unpredictable currents up there. Inside, nestled on black velvet, was a simple, surprisingly heavy silver chain and a folded piece of thick, expensive-feeling paper. On it, in neat, block capitals, were the 3 rules. My skin prickled. "Some flights," Bellamy murmured, his voice dropping to a near whisper, his gaze flicking to Henderson's empty seat, "have protocols beyond the manual." Then he was gone, a phantom in a Navy uniform. I stared at the rules, a knot of ice forming in my stomach. Superstition? A tasteless joke? But Bellamy's demeanor, the flight itself, 733er, the R felt less like revised and more like repeat, or requiem. With a deep, unsettling sigh, I fastened the silver chain around my neck. Its chill was immediate, a stark contrast to the humid Louisiana air. Takeoff was smooth, into an astonishingly clear night sky. Stars blazed with an unnatural intensity. Then, as we climbed through 20,000 feet, it appeared. A wall of roiling, impenetrable fog where no fog should be. A localized, malevolent weather system that hadn't been on any satellite image or meteorological report. It swallowed us whole. The cockpit lights flickered, and the silver chain against my skin grew suddenly, perceptibly, warm. The fog was an entity. It wasn't just moisture. It was cold, unnaturally so. A damp, bone-chilling presence that seemed to deaden sound and leach warmth from the cockpit. The silver chain pulsed with a faint, steady heat against my collarbone. A small, tangible ward against the encroaching chill. Tasha, beside me, shivered, rubbing her arms. "Temperature drop is way off normal parameters, Captain," she muttered. Her voice tight, her usual confidence visibly frayed. Her eyes kept darting to the swirling gray soup outside the windscreen. "And my head feels like it's in a vice. You feeling this?" "Affirmative," I lied, though the silver seemed to be holding the worst of it at bay for me. I could still feel the pressure, though, an invasive mental static, like a detuned radio scratching at the edges of my thoughts, compensating for atmospheric density. A pilot's lie. Standard procedure for wildly non-standard phenomena. It was then that the radio crackled, not with a request from ATC, but with a burst of static, and then, impossibly, a single, drawn-out, mournful violin note. It hung in the air for a heartbeat, impossibly clear, achingly sad, before being swallowed again by the hiss. Tasha and I exchanged a wide-eyed glance. "What in God's name was that?" she breathed. Before I could answer, Louis's voice, strained, came over the intercom. "Captain, a small issue in the cabin. There's a young girl in seat 13, wearing an oxygen mask, though it's not connected. I didn't have her on my initial passenger count when we boarded. 13A, the seat that, on some older aircraft, didn't officially exist. A cold dread, sharp and familiar, snaked down my spine. The instruments began their insidious dance. The master clock on the console flickered, jumped back 3 minutes, then corrected itself. The altitude display wavered, dropping 1,000 feet, then snapping back to our assigned flight level. Tasha's fingers flew over her controls, her brow furrowed in a mixture of disbelief and professional frustration. This isn't right. The system diagnostics were clean. Bellamy himself signed off. The name now felt like a lead white. Louis's voice came again, even more hesitant. "Captain, something else. Some of the passengers, they're saying the same things, over and over, like they're stuck in a loop. Mrs. Henderson in 12XUs just asked me for a ginger ale for the 3rd time. Exact same words." A sudden, violent image flashed behind my eyes. The sickening lurch of an uncontrolled descent. The smell of burning fuel. Henderson's face, pale and wide-eyed in the emergency lights. His mouth forming a scream I couldn't hear. It was a memory fragment from the original Flight 733. So vivid it buckled my knees, if I hadn't been strapped in. The mundane click of a switch on the overhead panel had triggered it. My heart hammered. This wasn't just déjà vu. This was an echo. An encore. The violin. It returned, not as a single note, but as a full, sorrowful melody, weaving through the ever-present static, a phantom orchestra playing a dirge only we could hear. The tune was old, hauntingly familiar in its despair. Tasha, her face pale, managed to get a brief, stuttering satellite connection on her tablet. Her eyes widened. "That's Gloomy Sunday," she whispered, showing me the screen. The original 1930s orchestral arrangement, the one they called the Hungarian Suicide Song. She looked at me, a new, dawning horror in her eyes. There are urban legends, old pilot tales about certain routes, certain conditions. Louis's voice on the intercom was little more than a choked gasp. "Captain Calhoun, the coffee. The airline hasn't used this blend. This specific Sumatran roast. Since Skylink merged with Transcontinental 8 years ago, I remember it. It was my first month as a trainee. On flight 733. His voice broke. The carefully constructed dam of his professionalism was crumbling. Oh God, I remember the smell. Just before. He didn't finish. He didn't need to. The pieces were slotting into place, forming a picture of impossible recurring horror. A sudden gut-wrenching lurch threw us against our harnesses. Alarms screamed through the cockpit. Stall warnings. Overspeed alerts. Contradictory and terrifying. A deep, mechanical groan, like tortured metal, resonated through the fuselage. A sound that spoke of stresses no airframe was designed to withstand. Then, as quickly as it began, it stopped. An absolute, terrifying silence descended, broken only by our ragged breathing and the faint, insistent weeping of the violin from the radio. That was, I now saw with a fresh stab of cold, definitely switched off. A single red light began to blink insistently on the main annunciator panel. L2 cabin door. Unlocked. My blood turned to ice. We were at 30,000 feet, and that light. I remembered that light from my fragmented nightmares of the original 733. It had blinked just like that, a malevolent red eye, moments before the world tore itself apart. L2 door proximity sensor is armed, Captain, Tasha said, her voice strained, her knuckles white on the yoke. Pressure differential holding. For now. But that light means the locking bolts aren't fully engaged. Could be a sensor malfunction. Could be. Could be the second rule about to play out its horrifying script. The violin music swelled, no longer sorrowful, but imbued with a strange, expectant urgency. Lois' panicked voice crackled over the intercom. Captain, the passengers are... Some of them are calm. Too calm. Staring. That girl in 13, she's taken off her oxygen mask. She's smiling. Then, with a sound like a giant sigh followed by an explosive decompression, the L2 cabin door blew inwards, then was ripped from its hinges, vanishing into the shrieking, frigid blackness outside. A maelstrom of freezing air, debris, and panic engulfed the aircraft. Loose items, magazines, pillows, an unsecured service cart became deadly projectiles. The roar was deafening, a physical assault. The plane bucked and yawed violently through the swirling chaos in the cabin. Visible through the briefly open cockpit door, I saw a terrifying tableau. Passengers screaming, clutching at armrests at each other. And from the gaping rectangular wound in the fuselage, a vortex of roiling black mist, colder than the surrounding air, seemed to pour into the aircraft, not out. It swirled with impossible speed, and within its depths, I saw them, fleeting, contorted faces, pale and ephemeral, their eyes wide with an ancient terror. The faces from my nightmares, the faces of Flight 733's Lost. Tasha, driven by a pilot's instinct to assess and document, unbuckled and lurched towards the cockpit door, her phone already in her hand, trying to film the impossible. I have to get this. Proof, she yelled over the din. Tasha, no, I roared, but it was too late. As she reached the doorway, a tendril of that black spectral mist, distinct from the physical fog, lashed out from the chaos of the open L2 door. It was impossibly fast, unnervingly deliberate. It wrapped around her arm, and her scream was cut short as she was yanked, with horrifying force, towards the gaping hole. Louis, bless his terrified brave soul, lunged from the galley, grabbing her other arm. I fought against the violent G-forces, trying to regain some semblance of control over the aircraft, my eyes fixed on the unfolding horror. For a heart-stopping moment, it was a grotesque tug-of-war at 30,000 feet, Louis and a spectral entity battling for Tasha's life. Then, the mist pulsed, a deeper blackness within it. Tasha went limp. The tendril retracted, taking her with it, not out into the void, but into the swirling, multifaceted darkness that now seemed to fill the area around the breached doorway. She simply vanished. One moment there, the next, gone as if she'd never existed. The mist itself then seemed to dissipate, sucked back out, or perhaps absorbed into the very fabric of the plane. The L2 door warning light went out. The roaring wind subsided, replaced by an eerie whistling quiet around the now sealed, impossibly sealed, as if it had never opened, doorway. The pressure stabilized. Louis stumbled back into the galley, his face a mask of utter devastation and disbelief. She's gone, Captain. It took her. But the door, it's closed. How is it closed? I had no answers. Only the cold, brutal confirmation of the second rule. Someone had stepped out, or been taken. The silver chain around my neck felt like it was burning into my skin. And through the cockpit speakers, no longer the radio, but directly, as if whispered in my ear, came a child's voice, clear and cold. The sky has made its choice, Captain. One seat is now empty, for now. It was the voice of the girl from 13. The impossible closure of the L2 door. Tasha's inexplicable vanishing. These were not malfunctions. They were pronouncements. The rules of this spectral sky were absolute. Louis, when he finally staggered back into the cockpit, his face the color of old parchment, was a broken man. He kept murmuring about Tasha, about the faces in the mist, about the smell of ozone, and something else. Something like burnt sugar and despair. It's the same, Captain, he whispered, his eyes hollow. Just like before, the lights, the sounds, even some of the passengers. That man in 7B, the one who keeps asking for a bourbon. He was on 733. I served him that same bourbon moments before we fell. His voice cracked. We're flying a ghost. The temporal distortions escalated. The cockpit clock spun wildly, then settled on a time hours behind, then lurched forward. Outside, the fog writhed. And within its depths, I saw not just faces, but entire scenes play out. Brief, horrifying vignettes of other doomed flights, other eras, all trapped within Azrakel's domain. I saw a World War II bomber, riddled with flak, its crew frozen in attitudes of terror. I saw a small prop plane, lost in a blizzard, its pilot slumped over the controls. And then, with chilling clarity, I saw the cockpit of the original Flight 733. Henderson beside me, his face a mask of primal fear as the ground rushed up to meet us. My own reflection stared back from the console screen, younger, terrified, mouthing words I couldn't hear. The girl from 13, Mary Alice, her voice now a chillingly calm presence in my headset, spoke again. The sky remembers all its children, Captain. It gathers them. It wants its due for safe passage. Someone always has to pay the toll. Who will it be this time? Will you offer another? Her words were laced with an ancient predatory patience, a desperate idea, born of sheer terror and a pilot's ingrained need to understand system failures, took hold. The black box, the cockpit voice recorder, and flight data recorder. If this flight was an echo, a repetition, then perhaps, Louis, I said, my voice hoarse. Help me access the CVR housing. There's a manual override panel near the aft bulkhead. We need to see what this plane thinks it's been doing. It was a long shot, a breach of every protocol, but protocol had clearly vacated this aircraft. While Louis, moving like a man in a dream, fumbled with a maintenance toolkit, Bellamy's voice, smooth and chillingly familiar, oozed from the main speakers, not the comms. It was as if he were standing right behind me. Looking for answers in the machine, Captain Calhoun? The machine only knows what it's told, what I've told it. The cockpit door slid open, though no one had touched the controls. Marcus Bellamy stood there, no longer in a technician's uniform, but in a Skylink pilot's uniform, identical to mine. His eyes, though, were the same. Flat, gray, and filled with a cold, ancient light. The silver chain I wore seared my skin. "It's a beautiful loop, isn't it?" Bellamy said, stepping into the cockpit. Tasha's empty seat seeming to welcome him. "Perfectly engineered. 8 years I've waited for you to be ready for this command performance, Rhett. 8 years since I made my own choice. In the screaming dark, a 733 tore itself apart. You were on that flight?" I gasped, the final horrifying piece clicking into place. "Oh, it was more than on it, Rhett. I survived it. Just like you, Azrakel is a discerning collector. It prefers a willing exchange. I offered it my service, my expertise in navigating these little dramas, in exchange for my life. And now, my service is almost complete. All it needs is a new shepherd for this particular flock. Someone with your unique connection, your profound guilt." He smiled, a terrible, knowing smile. "That's you, Rhett." He gestured to the CVR panel, which Louise, with a choked cry, had finally managed to pry open. It wasn't the standard orange box. It was older, darker, and wires, thin as spider silk, snaked from it, disappearing into the plane's infrastructure, glowing with a faint, malevolent pulse. It was Bellamy's chip Dugunan Albin OGP. Thai Jan, his anchor for this recurring nightmare. "Go on," Bellamy urged. "Listen to your past, Rhett, or your future. It all blurs up here." With trembling hands, I activated the playback. Not one recording, but layers upon layers. My own voice, strained, terrified, repeating phrases, warnings, screams. And then, chillingly clear, my voice saying, "The fog, it's alive. I understand now. This is my final chance to live." Rule number 3, spoken in my own voice. From a flight I had no conscious memory of, yet one I was undeniably living. Azrakel's presence slammed into us. The fog outside the cockpit windows wasn't just fog anymore. It was a writhing canvas of souls. The faces of Flight 733's lost, their eyes accusing, their mouths open in silent screams. The violin music reached a deafening, insane crescendo. The plane, now completely off any real-world course, plunged through a spectral thunderstorm, lightning illuminating the tormented faces in the clouds, the entire airframe groaning as if it were being torn apart by invisible titans. "Tasha!" I choked out, remembering her sudden disappearance. Bellamy waved a dismissive hand, a loose end. She was becoming too observant. Azrakel dislikes complications to the narrative. You, however, Rhett, you are the star. "This ends now, Bellamy," I snarled, my hand instinctively closing around the heavy silver chain at my neck. It was more than a piece of metal. It was the only thing that felt real, a focal point against the swirling insanity. Bellamy chuckled, a dry, rasping sound. "Oh, it will end, Rhett, one way or another. Azrakel is patient, but its hunger grows. Feel it? The sky itself is unmaking us. But there's a door, you know. A way out of the storm, out of the pain." He gestured vaguely towards the windscreen, where the ghostly faces swirled. "Step out. Embrace it. It's not death, not really. It's continuation. You become part of the sky, part of the song. You end this torment for yourself, and for all those poor souls trapped in your echo." He leaned closer, his breath like ice and old tombs. "It's a kind of peace, Rhett. I was offered it. I chose differently. But you can be free. You can be free." Luis, who had been slumped against the bulkhead, his eyes wide and vacant, suddenly twitched. A flicker of his old self returned. The silver," he gasped, his voice a thread. "On 733, Henderson, he had a silver flask. Just before we hit, he threw it at something in the fog. There was a scream. Not human. His eyes unfocused again, but the fragment hung in the air. Silver wasn't just a passive ward. It could be a weapon. Mary Alice's voice, now less child, more ancient entity, filled the cockpit, seeming to emanate from the very air around us. The final chance, Captain, is not merely to live, but to choose the nature of your sky. The pattern craves completion, but patterns can be broken if one is willing to rewrite the song with a new, discordant note. Was that a hint? A loophole? Or just another layer of Azrakel's cruel game? Bellamy watched me, his smile unwavering. She speaks in riddles, Rhett. The truth is simple. Your guilt for Flight 733, for Henderson, for all of them. You can lay it down. Let the sky take it. Let me finally be free of this cursed pact. Someone must captain this ghost ship. Why not the man who started its voyage? He was twisting the knife, using my own survivor's guilt against me. The plane gave a particularly violent lurch, throwing us against our straps. Warning lights flashed like a manic Christmas display. The spectral storm outside intensified, lightning striking impossibly close. The sound like the cracking of giant bones. Azrakel was losing patience. Time to choose, Captain, Bellamy hissed, his eyes glowing faintly with reflected spectral light. The door is always open for those who know how to knock. He meant a literal door, an escape hatch, a final, fatal step. Flight 733 was a journey through the impossible. Rhett Calhoun learned that some skies demand a terrifying toll. The rules were a desperate guide through a pattern of recurring horror. The loop was broken, but the echoes remain. Seriously, if you didn't stay until the very end, you missed the final chilling transmission, the twist that reveals the true, ongoing nature of Azrakel's domain. The last few moments will make you look differently at the clouds. What do you think Azrakel is? What was Marcus Bellamy's ultimate goal? Share your theories in the comments below. And if you made it through the storm, if the sky hasn't claimed you, then you're already a part of our crew. Subscribe to Night Creepypasta Rules, because some flights, they never truly land. And the sky is always hungry. The choice wasn't a choice. It was a sentence. Step out and become another of Azrakel's trapped whispers, freeing Bellamy to... what? Find another victim? Or simply fade away? Is debt paid? Or fight and risk a far more terrible dissolution? Louisa's fragmented memory of Henderson's silver flask, Mary Alice's cryptic words about a discordant note. They circled in my mind, battling the crushing despair. Rule 2. Someone needs to step out. Bellamy assumed it meant a person, a soul. But what if someone, or something, else could fulfill that? The CVR, Bellamy's cursed anchor, pulsed with that unholy light. It was the heart of this spectral engine. You're right, Bellamy, I said, my voice surprisingly steady. Someone does need to step out. I unbuckled my harness. A flicker of triumph crossed Bellamy's face. Wise decision, Rhett. The sky awaits its shepherd. But I wasn't moving towards an escape hatch. I lunged for the exposed CVR. The silver chain in my hand held taut, like a garrote. Bellamy, realizing my intent, roared in fury and dived for me. No, you fool! You'll destroy us all! The pattern must be respected! We grappled in the confines of the heaving cockpit. A desperate, brutal struggle. He was unnaturally strong, fueled by Azrakel's power, his fingers like iron claws. But I had the fury of a man with nothing left to lose, and the cold weight of the silver. The violin music shrieked. The faces in the fog pressed against the windscreen, their silent screams a symphony of torment. With a desperate surge, I slammed the taut silver chain against the glowing, wired heart of Bellamy's device. The effect was instantaneous and cataclysmic. A blinding flash of silver blue light erupted from the CVR, accompanied by a sound that was not a sound, but a deafening, soul-tearing absence of it, a void of silence that swallowed even Azrakel's chorus. Bellamy shrieked, a high, thin sound of pure agony, his form flickering, becoming translucent, as if the unholy energy that sustained him was being violently ripped away. The silver chain in my hand glowed white-hot, searing my flesh, but I held on. The spectral storm outside didn't just stop. It shattered. The ghostly faces dissolved into wisps of nothingness. The oppressive fog vanished as if it had never been, revealing a real, turbulent, pre-dawn sky. The plane, freed from Azrakel's grip, bucked and plunged. Now just a critically damaged aircraft following out of the sky, not a haunted relic. Bellamy was a fading outline, his voice a dying whisper. The cycle, broken, but the sky always remembers. Then he was gone, leaving only the faint scent of ozone and bitter regret. I fought for control, Luis. Jolted into a semblance of shocked awareness, fumbling to help. The CVR was a molten, smoking ruin. The violin was silent. We were battered, broken, but impossibly, we were flying in a real sky, albeit downwards. I don't remember much of the crash landing, a stretch of desolate salt flats in Nevada, a screaming, tearing symphony of metal, then darkness. When I woke, it was to the blessed mundane sound of rescue sirens. Luis was alive, babbling incoherently. A few passengers, those who weren't direct echoes of the lost, had survived, dazed and injured. Tasha Reynolds and Marcus Bellamy were listed as missing, presumed lost at some point during the unexplained catastrophic system's failure in flight. Officially, Flight 733 was a miracle of survival, a testament to pilot skill in the face of an unprecedented series of malfunctions. Unofficially, in the hushed corridors of the NTSB, it was a flight of whispers and redacted reports. I never flew again. The silver chain, now tarnished and bearing the faint imprint of my seared flesh, never leaves my neck. I live quietly far from airports, far from mountains that scrape the upper atmosphere. But sometimes, on a clear, cold night, when the wind sighs just right, I hear a faint, impossibly distant violin melody. And sometimes, a wisp of fog will roll in from nowhere, clinging to my window pane. Even when the rest of the sky is clear, the sky always remembers. And sometimes, even now, I feel its cold, patient gaze, and I know that Azrakel is still out there, tending its flock, waiting for another lost flight, another shepherd. The loop might be broken for me, but the song of the sky, ancient and hungry, never truly ends.